Slick and Shiny tongue-in-cheek productions once more takes you for a trip back in time to look at the past of one of the local communities. When I say local, I mean places in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. Today we're going to look at a place called Trafford. And when Trafford started out, it didn't have that name. But we'll talk about that because the story of Trafford has at least 2 chapters. And the first chapter is not called Trafford. It was called Stewart Station. Now the reason for that is because once upon a time the Pennsylvania Railroad put the main line of their new railroad right through this place where there were farms around there. And when the railroad was first being built, they were very aware of the fact that they needed income for the railroad. And so they thought, if we have these little stations every here and there where there are farms, then these farms will utilize the railroad for shipping their goods, and also for, the people who live there will want to use our railroad for personal transportation. The Pennsylvania Railroad prior to 1850, well, let's say prior to 1846, didn't exist. And in 1846, they got their charter from the state of Pennsylvania to build a railroad. And up to that point, there was really no railroad in Pennsylvania to the west of Harrisburg in the Susquehanna River. And finally, well, what I'll do here as I talk some more, I'll just put some pictures on. Finally, in the final days, the final month of 1852, the Pennsylvania Railroad got up and running. They got a railroad running the whole way from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. And one of the places on that railroad that the railroad stopped was called Stewart Station. And it was called Stewart Station because, well, there was a station there, and it was built on land that had been in the name of the Stewart family. They had been around there for a while. Actually, from the late 1700s, there were Stewarts around there. Not to mention other families like the Cavets and the Brintons. That was really the first chapter of the story of Trafford. And the second chapter of the story of Trafford begins with a guy named George Westinghouse. His business, which was in East Pittsburgh, needed to expand, as did a lot of other industrial enterprises. And he was looking at, possibilities for expansion. And what he looked at was this place out here called Stewart Station. So he bought property out there and began to build, first of all, a town and then a factory, because he needed a foundry for all the work he was doing. And that is really how Trafford came about. The name he gave to his new town and factory, the area, came from a place in England where he had a factory. It was called Trafford Park. And it seems like he liked that name. So when he started a town out here in Pennsylvania, he decided to name the place Trafford City. I guess he had hopes that it might become bigger than just a little town, he gave the name Trafford City to it. Now what I'm going to do is switch gears a little bit here, and we're going to look at some of the pictures and give them a little bit of explanation. This is the first year that the Pennsylvania Railroad started running, 1852. And it was a big thing when they just started, because a railroad was, for the people there then, was a really big deal. And this was the original Stewart Station. And that was the name that the place had until about 1902 or 3, in that neighborhood, when they started Trafford. In 1904, they got the charter for the town, for Trafford City, and it became no longer just a area in North Huntington Township, but it became a actual municipality. It became a certain borough, the borough of Trafford City. This is mapping from 1857. And you see Trafford Station right up here. Here's the depot. This line here represents the Pennsylvania Railroad. And just down below Stewart Station was a place called Cavittsville. But the railroad didn't stop there. In the course of time, this is from 1867. In the course of time, the center of gravity switched from Cavittsville up to Stewart Station. The post office that was down here moved up to the station, and a lot of other things, including a church and other commercial enterprises. That was the station itself. Interesting little sidelight was when the Pennsylvania Railroad first started up, they did not have a lot of money to pay their people. One of the things they did was, in a lot of the early stations, they would put living quarters in the upstairs of a station so that the station master could get living quarters at the same place he worked, which means he wouldn't get paid as much as a station master, but he received living space. And you see these windows upstairs indicates that there were living quarters upstairs. This is the old Trafford Station before it became Trafford. This was Stewart Station. Right here that I'm circling, that was the railroad station itself. And there were a cluster of things that had collected around there. What I'm circling here is another view, from another point of view, of the station. In 1869, the people there got together and had a church built, a Presbyterian church. That's right here. You can see other families are grouping around there. And in 1879, the post office that had been down in Cavittsville was moved up here to Stewart Station. And then finally in about 1902, in that area, then Westinghouse started his expansion up there, and they changed the name to Trafford City. This is the Presbyterian church that was built up there. And that was Stewart's homestead. That was the Stewart family. That was a nice old drawing that somebody did of the homestead of the Stewarts. And I worked the drawing up a little bit and put some color on it. I think color helps a lot. These are folks who no doubt lived at the Stewart homestead. John Stewart III was the grandson of the first Stewart who moved out there. These are all Stewart family members. And you notice that they all have the name Shaw as a middle name. John Stewart III had married a woman whose last name was Shaw. This fellow here became a physician, a doctor, and moved back to Stewart Station to perform his services to help people as a doctor. This young fellow here went to school and became a lawyer. And he was at one time the lawyer for Allegheny County, the district attorney. And I think we are going to shut this down at this point because we've said enough, and we will continue with another one.